You think you understand loneliness, but you have no idea what true isolation looks like. There exists a psychological type so rare, so misunderstood, that Carl Jung himself called it one of the most difficult modes of being to comprehend, not just for others, but for the person living it. This is the intuitive introvert, and if you are one, Jung left you a warning that could save your sanity or destroy it completely. You don't operate like other people. While they chase facts, concrete results, and observable emotions, you live in a completely different dimension. Your compass isn't external logic or empirical observation. Your compass is internal, and it points toward things that don't exist yet. You perceive meanings before they form, sense psychic movements before they become conscious, and navigate by a sensitivity to the invisible that others cannot even imagine. The concrete world with its practical demands feels foreign to you, not because you're arrogant or disinterested, but because your attention is locked onto another plane entirely, a symbolic realm that operates outside linear time. For you, facts are merely shadows of something more essential, something still gestating in the depths of collective consciousness. Jung described you as someone who perceives what is about to be but is not yet. You see potential, psychic futures, cultural transformations announcing themselves before they become visible to anyone else. This isn't mystical nonsense. This is how your mind actually functions. You're oriented toward the emerging, the forming, the approaching. You live at the threshold between now and not yet. But this extraordinary sensitivity comes with a price that Jung knew would break most people. The world around you operates on a completely different frequency. Society demands proof, results, objective data. What you perceive is intangible, at least initially. The result is an unbridgeable abyss between what you see internally and what the world expects from you. Your perceptions get ridiculed, ignored, pathologized. You're the person who intuits something essential about someone you just met, who feels ruptures in the air before events occur, who senses outcomes long before facts confirm them. But when you try to communicate this, you encounter silence or rejection. So you learn to remain silent, to keep your inner world private and impenetrable. And Jung warned, this is precisely where the real danger begins. When you cannot translate your visions into language, art, or concrete action, you risk being consumed by them entirely. The inner world that should be your source of revelation becomes your prison. You've been living with a gift that could be your salvation or your destruction, and you probably don't even realize which direction you're heading. Jung discovered that your type, the intuitive introvert, doesn't just see differently. You see what others cannot see, perceive what hasn't happened yet, and sense the archetypal movements beneath surface reality. But this prophetic vision comes with a curse that Jung spent his life trying to understand. Your intuition doesn't operate in present time. This is crucial to understand. While everyone else lives in the now, you inhabit the threshold between now and not yet. You sense the approach of events, perceive archetypal changes in the psychic and cultural fabric before they manifest in concrete form. This capacity for anticipation makes you, in Jung's words, akin to a prophet, someone who sees what others cannot yet see. But here's the dilemma that will tear you apart if you don't face it. What you see cannot be proven. What you feel cannot be justified with facts. What you intuit rarely finds resonance in others. This creates a constant, grinding conflict between the inner clarity of your vision and the complete lack of external recognition. You begin to doubt yourself. Or worse, you take refuge in your perceptions with such absolute conviction that you reject the world around you entirely. In both cases, the tension between the perceived invisible and the denied visible begins to corrode your psyche like acid eating through metal. Jung documented this pattern repeatedly. A patient described seeing a black snake lodged in her abdomen during analysis. As treatment progressed, this snake began to rise within her body until it emerged from her mouth and transformed into a serpent with a golden head. To most people, this would seem like delusional fantasy. But Jung interpreted the image as a clear symbol of inner transformation, a process of individuation taking visual form through the unconscious. This is exactly how your mind operates. You don't speak with logic, you speak with images. You don't point to causes, you reveal destinies. Your perceptions emerge as symbols, as archetypal patterns, as premonitions that bypass rational analysis entirely. The problem begins when these images don't find external language, when the symbol remains untranslated, unexpressed through creation, reflection, or action. This is when everything starts to collapse. The vision that once revealed truth begins to close in on itself. Your mind loses the ability to distinguish insight from illusion. What was symbolic wisdom becomes solitary delirium. The boundary between revelation and madness is razor thin, and you walk upon it every single day. Jung knew this better than anyone because he lived it himself. He spent years navigating his own symbolic visions, learning to distinguish meaningful archetypal content from psychological noise. But here's what Jung discovered that could save you. The moment vision becomes possession is the moment you stop being the observer and become the observed. The symbols that should serve consciousness begin to dominate it instead. You cease to be the one who contemplates the images. You become the one who is possessed by them. Here's where Jung's warning becomes deadly serious. And if you don't pay attention, this could be the moment your gift transforms into your destruction. You are by nature a solitary individual, not by choice, but by the very structure of your psyche. Your attention flows toward what cannot be seen, what hasn't taken shape yet, what emerges from the unconscious in symbols, visions, and premonitions that others find incomprehensible. But this inner orientation, when it doesn't find expression or connection with the external world, creates the perfect conditions for something Jung called inflatio, psychic inflation. This is the moment when your ego becomes inflated by unconscious contents, and you begin to identify with powerful archetypes without recognizing your human limitations. It happens subtly at first. You perceive deep symbolic patterns that others miss entirely. You sense the approach of cultural shifts, understand hidden motivations, glimpse the archetypal foundations beneath surface events. This sensitivity is real, it's not delusion. But then something dangerous begins to shift in your understanding of yourself. You start to believe you've been chosen for a special mission. This sense of uniqueness, initially legitimate as a reflection of your rare sensitivity, transforms into something far more dangerous, a Messianic illusion. You begin to see yourself as a bearer of absolute truths, an unrecognized visionary, a prophet rejected by a blind and inferior society. Criticism from others gets reinterpreted as persecution. Doubt becomes a sign of others' spiritual inferiority. Your isolation deepens, not as a consequence of your gift, but as justification for your superiority. No one understands me because I am more evolved becomes your unconscious mantra. This type of psychic inflation dissolves your capacity for self-criticism entirely. You begin living within your own symbolic narrative with no clear distinction between archetypal content and concrete reality. You identify completely with images from the unconscious, the wise sage, the misunderstood martyr, the prophetic messenger, and you lose contact with your ordinary humanity. Jung observed this pattern in personalities who emotionally isolated themselves and resisted any form of adaptation to the world. The danger wasn't the isolation itself, it was what came afterward, the complete colonization of consciousness by the unconscious. When this happens, your ego ceases to mediate between inner and outer reality. Instead, it becomes a passive receptacle for symbolic images. Your perception becomes distorted, your judgment contaminated, and your existence begins moving in a subtly delusional fantasy realm where everything seems to make profound sense, but nothing connects to anything real. You start seeing yourself as carrying messages that humanity isn't ready to receive. Every rejection confirms your special status. Every misunderstanding proves how far ahead of your time you are. You become convinced that your symbolic insights are more valuable than practical engagement with the world. But here's Jung's crucial insight. This over-identification with archetypes leads to complete psychic fragmentation. The intuitive function that once offered glimpses of genuine meaning transforms into a vehicle of escape from reality. Practical life gets neglected. Relationships become merely instrumental. Any contradiction gets rejected as a threat to your inner vision. This is the trap that catches most people with your psychological makeup. The very gift that could make you a bridge between worlds becomes the prison that separates you from all worlds. Here's the truth that could save your psychological life. The unexpressed symbol doesn't just fade away. It becomes a foreign body within your psyche, acting with autonomous power that you cannot control. Jung discovered that for your type, symbolic expression isn't an aesthetic luxury or a creative hobby. It's a vital necessity, as essential as breathing. The difference between the creative visionary and the fragmented mystic comes down to one crucial factor: the ability to transform the invisible into form. When you find a way to externalize your perceptions through art, writing, music, ritual, or any other medium, you transform your symbolic solitude into communication. Your strangeness becomes language. Your isolation transforms into impact. What was once an internal labyrinth becomes a map that others can follow. And this act of creation has a dual effect that Jung observed repeatedly. It not only relieves the dangerous buildup of psychic tension within you, but it also offers the collective access to contents that were previously locked in the unconscious. Look at the patterns throughout history. Franz Kafka, most likely operating from your same psychological configuration, channeled his symbolic alienation into labyrinthine texts that still capture the absurdity of modern existence. Vincent van Gogh, unable to adapt to the practical world, poured his emotional and symbolic vision into explosive brushstrokes, each painting a desperate attempt to translate a boiling soul into visible form. Even Jung himself, who recognized this type within his own nature, wrote his deepest works as attempts to translate complex internal experiences into comprehensible systems. The Red Book, his most personal work, was literally his attempt to give form to the archetypal visions that threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. But this isn't about genius or rare talent. What these examples reveal is that symbolic expression is the bridge between inner and outer worlds. When this bridge doesn't exist, the symbol accumulates like psychological pressure building in a sealed container. It closes in on itself and begins to distort your perception of reality entirely. But when there's a way out, when the inner image becomes work, gesture, word, action, this reorganizes your entire psyche. The intuitive function ceases to operate in darkness and begins to collaborate with consciousness. You stop being possessed by your visions and start becoming their conscious director. Creativity, then, isn't just a gift you might have. It's a process of psychological integration that your type absolutely requires for mental health. The symbol needs to find form, or it will find a way to take form of you instead. However, even the richest symbolic expression may not be enough if there's no grounding in concrete reality. You tend by your very structure to neglect the body, routine, and material limits. This exposes you to new dangers even in your creativity. Expression can become compulsion. Inspiration can transform into another form of escape from the world. True integration only happens when the symbol also finds a foundation in the physical world. When your otherworldly intuition gets balanced by what Jung called the sensation function, your connection to immediate, tangible, present moment reality. Your intuitive function operates outside of time, body, and linear reality. It dives into the unconscious depths, gathers symbols and premonitions from archetypal realms, then returns carrying visions that belong to no concrete world. This ability gives you your enigmatic brilliance, but it's also what makes you dangerously unstable. Without an anchor, without solid foundation in the present moment, your intuition risks becoming a psychological whirlpool that drowns you. This is why Jung emphasized something that will probably sound mundane and irrelevant to you: the critical importance of integrating your inferior function, sensation. Sensation is what keeps ordinary people connected to the now, to their bodies, to the material world. It perceives what's tangible: the warmth of sunlight on skin, the bitter taste of coffee, the weight of objects in hands, the rhythm of breathing. For you, who tends to neglect these perceptions as mundane or irrelevant, sensation seems like a foreign language. But it's precisely this language that provides the antidote to excessive abstraction. It's in the materiality of simple things that you can find the balance that prevents your gift from destroying you. Walking with conscious attention to each step, cooking while focusing on textures, temperatures, and tastes, tending to plants with awareness of soil, moisture, and growth cycles, practicing manual crafts that require physical coordination, simply maintaining a routine that honors your body's needs and rhythms. The return to body, to routine, to present-time awareness doesn't deny your symbolic depth, it sustains it. When you manage to alternate between intuitive diving and concrete practice, your visions cease to be labyrinths and become roots. You become capable of moving between worlds, the internal and external, the invisible and tangible. This transit between dimensions is what characterizes true psychic maturity. The symbol ceases to be an object of passive contemplation and transforms into a real guiding force that shapes your actual life, decisions, and relationships, not as an oracle that you worship, but as a compass that you consciously follow. Everyday rituals assume therapeutic function in this context. They don't need to be grand or esoteric. They can be as simple as lighting a candle at dawn, writing in a journal at day's end, or intentionally organizing your workspace. These small acts create an axis within internal chaos. They're gestures that tell your unconscious, there is order here, there is body here, there is reality here. In this ritualized space, the symbol can descend to earth without exploding your psyche. The integration of sensation isn't a limitation on your intuitive gifts. It's what allows your intuition to flourish with greater strength and stability. But even when you develop symbolic expression and build practices of grounding in physical reality, you still face what may be the hardest challenge of all: living your truth in a world that systematically rejects everything that cannot be measured, explained, or immediately monetized. How do you sustain your vision in an environment dominated by logic, productivity, and instant results? How do you continue listening to internal symbols when the external world demands obedience to the concrete and practical? This is the final battleground where your psychological survival will be determined. This is where Jung's understanding becomes revolutionary, and where most people with your psychological makeup will either transform completely or remain trapped forever. The final stage of development for the intuitive introvert isn't about perfecting your visionary gifts or finding better ways to express your symbolic perceptions. It's about something far more challenging: putting your extraordinary sensitivity in service of life itself. You've spent years, maybe decades, learning to navigate the tension between your inner symbolic world and external practical demands. You've discovered ways to express your visions through art, writing, or other creative channels. You've developed practices that ground your ethereal insights in physical reality. But there's one more step that separates the truly individuated from those who remain spiritually adolescent. You must stop using your gifts as reasons to avoid full engagement with the messy, difficult, imperfect reality of human existence. Your symbolic sensitivity cannot become a sophisticated escape from the challenges of relationship, work, responsibility, and participation in collective life. The immature intuitive introvert uses their gifts as justification for withdrawal. Others don't understand me. The world is too harsh for my sensitive nature. My visions are too profound for ordinary people to comprehend. These become elaborate rationalizations for avoiding the real work of living. The individuated intuitive introvert brings their full visionary capacity into engagement with life as it actually exists. Your prophetic insights serve the improvement of real relationships with real people. Your symbolic understanding informs practical decisions about work, money, family, and community participation. Your archetypal awareness becomes a resource for helping others navigate their own psychological development. This shift requires what Jung called active imagination, not just receiving visions passively, but entering into conscious dialogue with archetypal content and directing it toward life-serving purposes. You become a conscious collaborator with the unconscious rather than its passive recipient. When you achieve this final integration, your entire relationship with your gifts transforms. You no longer feel burdened by carrying perceptions that others cannot understand. Instead, you feel purposeful about translating invisible wisdom into visible service. Your isolation transforms from protective withdrawal into conscious solitude that recharges you for deeper engagement. You stop needing the world to validate your perceptions because you've learned to validate them through their practical fruits. Your visions prove their worth not through external recognition, but through their capacity to improve your relationships, enhance your effectiveness, and contribute to the collective good. The final question Jung posed to intuitive introverts is this: will you use your extraordinary gifts to become a conscious servant of life's deepest purposes? Or will you remain a prisoner of your own sensitivity? Will your visions serve the world's healing and evolution? Or will they become elaborate forms of spiritual narcissism? This choice determines whether you complete the journey of individuation or remain forever caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. The path forward requires courage, humility, and the willingness to let your most sacred perceptions be tested against the demands of actual living. But those who make this final integration discover something Jung promised. They become agents of transformation whose very presence in the world creates possibilities that wouldn't exist without them.